The distant Tea Party thunder has now arrived, reverberating in the corridors of Congress, and we met a lot of the 87 Republican freshmen. Half of them are from the Tea Party yesterday as we made our way across the Capitol. And we gathered 10 brand new members of Congress together to mark this moment after the fiery rhetoric of the campaign. This is the day they have to start delivering.
Here they are. The Beltway version of a motorcycle gang riding in on a wave of taxpayer and Tea Party discontent. And now it's their turn.
I just want to go around each of you and ask you to give me the one word that best expresses what you felt when you walked in, knowing you were here.
Humility.
Determined.
The imminence of the problems.
Expensive.
You mean as in?
Washington is expensive. It costs the American people a lot of money.
I'd say humility.
But what about Congressman Brooks, who fiercely attacked the former Speaker, Nancy Pelosi?
What is the message to Washington? Fire Pelosi!
What's the first word going to be when you see her?
My first word will be hi. On a personal level, be happy to go out to lunch with her, chat with her. But we're going to fight pretty hard when it comes down to some of the basic beliefs that we have.
And you know what? I'm conservative, but I'm not mad about it. I can do it with a smile on my face, and we can have civil discourse. And hopefully,
Senator, there was a sense that everybody had come to storm the place.
I couldn't disagree more. I could not disagree more. The idea behind the Tea Party movement is neither partisan, nor is it angry.
I don't think we're angry, but I do think that the people of the United States have been angry, and for the right reasons. The bottom line is our government hasn't listened.
So what are they going to do on that first really tough vote? Will they actually allow the U.S. to default on its IOUs rather than vote to raise the amount the U.S. can borrow? Their own Speaker, John Boehner, says it's an adult moment and should be raised. The White House economic advisor says raise it or...
The impact on the economy would be catastrophic.
It will be catastrophic? That it will be the first time in history that there will be a default by the United States caused by insanity.
There's got to be a time where you say no, where you say no more. We've got to get our house in order.
But when they're saying it will be catastrophic to say no.
But they present it as a false choice.
Right.
What about we spend what we take in?
They told us they want to use this vote as leverages for promises to cut in the future. But the Democrats have a challenge for the Republicans, saying if you're going to cut spending, go ahead and start close to home. Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler of Missouri got more than $750,000 in taxpayer subsidies for her farm.
Are you ready to vote against all farm subsidies? That's $20 billion by one estimate at least.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think everything should be on the table. And yes, there's a lot of us farmers that have participated in the program.
Congressman Stutzman of Indiana got more than $100,000.
yes, I would vote to eliminate farm subsidies. It manipulates the market. And that's the problem here in Washington. The adult conversation, I think, has to be no.
Agree?
I'm ready to just start the discussion and look at it.
Not a yes yet?
I think we need to make sure everything is looked at before we just pick on the farmers.
And on the promise to repeal health care reform, Democrats ask, will they be giving up their new taxpayer-subsidized insurance? Only 2 of them said they would.
First of all, Congress should not be exempt from rules they pass, and that's exactly what happened here. In fact, I ask everybody to denounce that, because we shouldn't be taking that unlike anybody else in regular, everyday America.
I'm not taking the health insurance either.
The rest of you who are not renouncing it, how do you answer this?
There's a big difference between receiving health insurance through one's employer, on the one hand, and on the other hand, establishing a national regulatory program that tells people where to go to the doctor and how to pay for it.
But the taxpayer doesn't have an option but to support.
Look,
the taxpayer has no
healthcare
choice.
regulation is fundamentally a creature of state law. This is a state issue.
We'll let you know later what each of them decides. But for now, they are in total 87 new Americans, ophthalmologists, farmers, pottery store owners, just trying to find their way around a new life and a new town.
My wife and I, we were surprised to discover that to buy a place where you can park your car costs more than our first house. That was remarkable.
Who's going to live in their office?
I'm one of the sleepers.
What do you have, a sleeping bag, a sofa?
No, bullet mattress. They work out very, very well.
I'm going to be living with my dad here. You know, not sleeping in my office, but living with my dad. So
What's
I'll get
that
to see
gonna be like?
Well, I don't know. We'll see. Most kids, most people are ready to have their kids move out after college. I'm 47 and I'm moving back in.
And everyone coming here said they'd seen that Jimmy Stewart movie about Mr. Smith.
The filibuster.
Jimmy Stewart wins.
How many of you see yourselves still here in 10 years? Really? 2 years?
I don't think it's about us individually. It's about what needs to be changed for the country.
We could pass a balanced budget amendment and term limits. I'll go home next week. I mean, I want some rules in Washington, then I'll go back and be a doctor.
So help you God. Congratulations.
You know, many of us probably yell at our TV in frustration over, you know, what in the world are they thinking back there? And now you have an opportunity to actually have a voice.
No matter what happens, it's the most wonderful country in the world, and office is just a real humbling and a real solemn duty.
And the full conversation will be on abcnews.com.
Joining us now, two new members of the U.S. Senate. Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky, joins us from there, and Democrat Chris Coons, who comes to us from his home state of Delaware. Senators, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks for being with us. I'll ask you the same question I asked Representatives Clyburn and Rogers to start off here about the tragedy in Arizona. Does this shooting say anything about the political discourse in the U.S., and does it change anything in Washington? Senator Paul, first to you.
Well, I think most importantly, in the initial stages here, we need to emphasize the humanity and the tragedy of this whole thing. You know, we're people like anybody else. Representative Giffords has a family and children, and I think that's what's most important, that we talk about the tragedy and how awful this is. And before we take the step beyond that, you know, once you do take a step beyond that, I looked at some of the writings of this young man, and from a medical point of view, there's a lot to suggest paranoid schizophrenia, that this man was a really sick individual. But absolutely we need to condemn the violence, and absolutely we need to have our prayers and our thoughts with those who suffered from this violence.
Senator Coons?
Well, Annie and I have been praying for Gabby and her family, for all the victims of yesterday's attack in Tucson. This kind of senseless violence is never appropriate in our country, least of all when it's directed at somebody like Congresswoman Giffords, who is a caring and an energetic and engaged and a committed public servant who was working hard to try and improve the lives of her constituents. We spent much of yesterday afternoon in horror watching as this all unfolded. And I do think, as Senator Paul says, that all of us need to be mindful of the fact that this was an act of a deranged individual. We need to be more cautious and concerned about our security, but we also need to be rededicated to the work of trying to serve our constituents, of remaining active and engaged in the institution of the Congress, and moving ahead to tackle the very real challenges ahead of us. Since I first met Gabby roughly a decade ago, she impressed me as someone who was a tireless and dedicated public servant, and I hope we'll all move forward in a positive way. We'll reduce some of the heated rhetoric of the election campaign and move towards some of the real challenges that lie ahead of us.
Senator Coons, do you think this incident will reignite efforts by gun control advocates to push for revision in gun laws?
Well, I do think we need to responsibly enforce the existing gun laws that place barriers for those who are mentally unstable to gun ownership or gun use. But I think, frankly, that we need to move forward towards the biggest challenges in front of us, making sure we get Americans back to work, tackling our deficit and our debt, dealing with the conflict in Afghanistan. There's big challenges right in front of us, and I frankly think that's what Congress needs to be focused on.
Senator Paul, Arizona is one of 3 states where you can carry a concealed weapon without a permit. Alaska and Vermont are the other 2. Is that at all in jeopardy, do you think?
No, I don't think so. And interestingly, you know, Representative Giffords was a defender of the Second Amendment and is a defender of the Second Amendment. So no, I don't think that plays into this at all. And I don't think this really, I think they're unrelated. It's probably about a very sick individual and what should have been done for that person. But the weapons don't kill people. It's the individual that killed these people.
This is obviously on the minds of all the members of Congress, and as we heard, the House is delaying its action on health care, but there are a lot of legislative things to talk about coming up very soon. There's been a lot of talk about the upcoming vote to raise the federal debt ceiling. As you can see by this chart, Congress has done it many times before, but Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner said Thursday that the country's current debt limit, you see it here, $14.29 trillion, could be reached as early as March 31st. A question to both of you. Do you know specifically what will happen if the debt ceiling is not raised? In specific, Senator Paul first.
Well, I can't imagine voting to raise the debt ceiling unless we're going to change our ways in Washington. So I'm proposing that we link to raising the debt ceiling, that we link a balanced budget rule, an ironclad rule that they cannot evade. They've shown themselves to be untrustworthy. You're right, they raise it every 6 months or every year, but then they never change anything. So even if we attach some token spending cuts to it, I don't think that's enough. We've got to change the rules, and we have to say to Washington, balance the budget. You have to do it by law, and then I'll vote to raise the debt ceiling, but only if we have an ironclad balanced budget rule that we attach to the debt ceiling.
But, Senator Paul, we've heard the administration, Austin Goolsbee, Treasury Secretary Geithner's letter about what potentially could happen to the economy and a default. Do you have any sense of what could happen if this vote fails?
Well, it's interesting. You know, the president's advisors are saying this, but in 2006, then Senator Obama voted against raising the debt ceiling and said that it would be irresponsible to raise the debt ceiling, that it was a failure of our leadership to control the debt. So it's a little disingenuous now for them to say the sky is falling, you absolutely have to do it.